If you look at the pound that's lifted off some of the lows, do you think the market's getting a little bit more comfortable with a hard Brexit notion?
I wouldn't say it's becoming more comfortable. I think we've got to a scenario where most investors are already short of sterling, so in a sense it's the question as to what will be the catalyst to actually encourage another round of selling pressure. So I don't think it's comfort. I think it's more a case of a pause and just awaiting fresh information, which of course is rather scant in its expectation.
Do you have an inkling as to what could cause sterling to fall further? I mean, some of the expectations of 110 being the weaker calls on sterling. What could the commentary be, or data point, or trigger as you see it?
Well, I think, as I say, positioning is fairly extreme. It's been very easy to make some very, very extreme calls in terms of sterling when we've been falling very dramatically. I guess the question is, how are the politics going to play it? That's still the crux of the issue here. And of course, from an international investor standpoint, that's the issue that perhaps is least well understood. So I think it will be a case of a recognition, or at least a realization, that we are moving towards a scenario which is going to be rather damaging for UK PLC. And I think also, as we start to see that reflected in the data points going into next year, as the inflation level continues to move up, question marks about the ability of the consumer to maintain expenditure. So I think that sort of Q1 period is probably going to be the next sort of potential catalyst for another round of sterling negativity as we run into that Article 50 triggering point.
One question, Jeremy. Do you think this sharp move in sterling is starting to unnerve the Bank of England, and any reaction function shifts from them then goes back to sterling dynamics, or do you get a sense of that?
No, I don't. I mean, clearly we've seen a reallocation or a repricing of sterling. In a sense, I think the Bank of England would almost regard that as saying, well, this is a sort of a shock absorber. That's the phrase that Ben Broadbent used earlier in the week, and I think we've seen this previously under the previous governor, that the Bank of England is prepared to look through a temporary one-off inflation shock, as long as it is a one-off scenario and we're not going to see a protracted change in inflation expectations. So I think at this juncture it isn't something which is going to be a particular concern for the Bank of England. Of course they will be mindful of it. Of course it has implications for inflation, which we will see writ large in the quarterly inflation report, but I don't think it impacts their reaction function at this juncture.
That is a great question, because obviously he's been trying to solve one problem, fight one fire, but actually a sterling crisis, which there is a degree of sterling crisis, I would suggest, whether it's managed or not, is historically dealt with by getting this book out, not the other, which basically, Le Mans, 1992, 15% interest. 15% interest
that worked very well, didn't it?
It worked very well. Well, yeah, not really, because it was terrifying for all of us at the time, if I remember correctly. But the rule book for that is to hike rates or be more aggressive on your monetary policy, to defend your sterling. Now, he can't fight both fires, so does he have to prioritise the former, which he started off prioritising, or does he have to change strategy?
Well, clearly, if we were going to have another round of aggressive sterling capitulation, if those parity calls in cable are then starting to come to fruition, then maybe the Bank of England would need to recalibrate its monetary policy experience. But I think as it stands at the moment, the bank is very much focused on the former. It isn't concerned about the impact of this falling currency. Of course, the UK has a twin deficit problem. Part of that will be dealt with, or at least alleviated, by the decline in sterling in terms of remittances, in terms of foreign earnings. But nevertheless, the UK still has a structural problem, a structural imbalance on both the current account and on the fiscal side. And that probably does imply that sterling needs to be cheap, but it's a case of whether we're in free fall.